Welcome back, everyone. It's Chris Reeves with TRIARC Systems, and today I have Jonas Polson with me. And welcome to part 3 of our night vision series. Jonas Polson, he's the owner and operator of Tactical Options, and also he's our director of training and subject matter expert on night vision. And when it comes to employment of night vision and tactics, techniques, all that stuff. Today we're just going to go over the basics. This is not going to be a comparison video of, because the last video we talked about just accessories, but we're not here to do comparisons as far as different types of lasers out in the market. We have one laser, we have one set of NVGs, and Jonas is going to kind of help us and run through the whole installation process. So now you have a laser, now you have night vision, what next? And this is basically what that video is, and this is Jonas's expertise, so where it comes into play, because he has multiple methods of how to do this. And so we're going to, Jonas is going to run down the different ways he can obviously install a laser onto the gun, and how to zero it. That's the most important part, because you have night vision, you have a laser, you see the dot going down there, but you have to have the rifle zero to it. And there's different techniques as far as how to zero and employ the laser and way to group the rifle. So Jonas, yeah, if you want to kind of take away as far as what we're going to do and some of the different options and techniques that are out there that you can explain, and then we can also employ it right now on the rifle.
Yeah, so very simple. We just go ahead. We can go over a couple products right now, and then kind of discuss them. Just like Chris said, that there's several different brands and manufacturers out there to utilize, and then different classes of lasers that has to correspond with basically just power, and then what's the power output right there. But first off, I'll say that night vision technology has become more and more and utilized, especially in law enforcement operations, and then now there's a recreational aspect to it that people are interested in, and go out there and play with guns. And then, but yes, there is a couple things that you just kind of need to know as basics to be successful, especially when you're focusing on the accuracy component on zeroing the laser itself. And there are some methods, and I'm going to get more in depth with that here in a little bit once we start setting the gun up, and then we actually go to zeroing the gun. And I will discuss the differences between parallel zero, converging zero, and then some quick kind of like field zeros that you can do very quickly, and then just a couple points of like accuracy you got to look at.
And those are those term guys, like he's just been out parallel zero, and like I said, Jonas has all these technical terms, and he's going to break those down because, like I said, just general terminology, people say, hey, zero. Well, with lasers, there's multiple ways to do it. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the biggest thing is whatever your method is just then holding into accountability, knowing my hold offs, point aim, point of impact, things that I should know at different distances and such, so I can be effective in making an accurate shot placement with my IR laser in conjunction with my night vision device.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, because I know a lot of individuals, even some of our customers and stuff like that, they have like a lot of property, things like that, and when they choose for home defense, they want that option for night vision, because if they're looking out their backyard or their, large area spaces and things like that, they don't want to shine a white light out there, in case, in a sense, or they want to see what's going on, or even inside home defense, you don't want to kick on the lights or
bring an indicator, draw attention to
exactly.
you.
So, and this is where some of that popularity is coming as far as our customer base, in the sense of what we've seen. Obviously, the hunting aspect is huge, and we've been on hunts before and using the night vision and things like that. But yeah, so what we'll do is, so today we have an IR laser, we have a set of PVS-31s, and let's get this. We'll get the rifle set up, and we'll go to the install. Okay. And then also too, we'll explain a little bit about your helmet, because obviously if you are mounting the night vision, you're going to need some type of equipment to mount it to your head, and the majority of the easiest way, if you agree with this, is to obviously there's multiple helmet options from different companies that have a night vision mount.
Right.
But I know some companies have like head harness, things like that. Is that correct? Or,
yeah. So there's head harnesses. I mean, got here an OpsCore ballistic helmet, but there's lighter options of that. So there's like the bumps or the Team Wendy versions of the bump helmet. And so that's mainly what you're going to see more for the recreational people, because nobody's going to want to come out and dump like 10 grand into a helmet right there off the bat. But then at the same time, like
some people might though.
You never know. You win that lottery. But then even on the tactical application for military and law enforcement, being transferred from tactical world to recreational aspect, or you as a law enforcement officer, if you guys are adapting to the technology to enhance your operations and capabilities, what are some things that you want to look at in terms of the helmet setup? Okay. And so within that, I'll just kind of talk about the helmet very quickly, why I have it, what I'm using. And as you guys can see, standard ballistic, ops core, helmet. I mean, we've all seen them. They've been around for years now, and Call of Duty and all that stuff. So everybody's becoming more accustomed to this style kind of cut, for a tactical helmet. And as you guys can see here, I've got a couple different options on there, utilizing the AMP headset from OpsCore.
Okay.
One of my favorite headsets. I mean, there's pros and cons to every system, a noise cancellation and a communications aspect. But for me, I've lost a pretty tremendous amount of hearing over the years, in just various stages, whether military or training. But on the AMP headset, for the clarity of sound and precision of sound, I've been able to, pick up a lot more, better with this system. And also in conjunction with that, one of the things the options that I like is that on the aspect of gunfire at extended range, if I'm trying to pinpoint, this will kind of help you out a little bit better than Peltors. So I've just been in different operating environments where, I hear something, but I'm not really sure exactly where it is, and I have to break my ear pro away to be able to pinpoint that. This has kind of helped me out.
So individuals, obviously, so when they, when you buy a helmet to mount night vision, so they have the capability, or most helmets have the capability to insert ear pro or have some type of, I know I got a set right here that has a strap, so you can wear it over your helmet and the brace in the back.
Or you just go normal and put in earplugs. So you don't have to even worry about all this.
And so right now, we had a long conversation yesterday in the sense of, so obviously the mount is going to play a good point. So the mount was going to adjust the NVGs toward your eyes as far as up, down, back and forward.
Yep.
And so obviously back here for this for the goggles that we have today, a battery box. So he's going to run. So right here, I've seen you have this cable on through there. Yeah. So that's going to be your primary power source.
So you can see here. I mean, within the housing unit itself of the PVS-31, so take a single lithium AA. So guys with night vision and your products, just because they're expensive, make sure you utilize the correct batteries where you want lithium that are vented in there so that the batteries don't explode. And then also you have the appropriate power output that's going to sustain you during your usage of your time. So if you use cheap batteries, I mean, it'll just burn out a lot quicker.
Plus the storage. I pulled out, somebody's brought in like an old laser.
Yeah.
And I want to screw the battery cap since they left the batteries, and there's corrosion.
Corrosion. So just, PCIs, looking at the housing components of your night vision device too, even your laser right here, you want to be able to open up these compartments and then take a look and make sure that there isn't kind of corrosion taking place with the batteries. If so, take them out and you can clean them out, just water, Q-tips, and then also rubbing alcohol. So that's one way. But with the NVGs itself, single battery, you get about like 15 to 16 hours of usage right there. You'll see in a top window if your battery's going down, there's a little indicator that's going to come up and then show you that, hey, my battery's going down. But utilizing the battery pack right there increases your lifespan to 60 hours of usage by average. And then you have a battery power cable that comes on up and then attaches, and then you guys can see here on the method of routing, there's a couple different ways on the setup. But just so I got it here with a coil. It's just kind of like a lazy S-roll going through. I don't want to be able to pinch these cables. That's going to damage it or impede the operation of it. I can run it exterior, but then just have to put in consideration of possible snags, like how do you place this so it doesn't get caught on something as you're moving through vegetation. This gets caught on a branch. Some guys will actually run the lines underneath the helmet just to make it more streamlined right there. So it's just an option. Just quickly threw this on, so I didn't have a lot of time to kind of mess around and stick it underneath. But on the back portion of the battery pack, especially with L3 products, they're making these. You have an internal built-in IR strobe right there for signaling, and we'll get some shots of that a little bit later here to show you how that's utilized, pros and cons for it.
So that's a good aspect when you're training, especially other individuals training together. So whether military LE, and you obviously, whenever you buy these products, you want to train with them to get better with it. And so that's a good option as far as multiple people training together, having these things on. So you have that when you're under night vision. Obviously you won't see it in when you have the night vision on. It's an IR flash, so you'll see individuals that have a good good awareness of where they're.
So it just helps out in various different fashions. So marking your position, if you have somebody up high looking down below. Also, if you're supporting an element and then there's another element that's moving. You can identify their forward trace or where they're positioned at. I mean, by communication, say me on my strobe or my flash. Also, in addition here, I have attached here the Hellstar as a secondary just in case this fails. Then I got IR, and then some of the things that guys can do when they're putting this together, they can choose different options of lighting if they want to color code specific teams as an identifier. So it's like, hey, you know, A team alpha, or team 1, team 2, hey, you're red or you're blue, and things like that. And this also helps out too with tactical operations in the sense of guys that don't have night vision and are working in low light, no light, and they can kind of identify and distinguish the difference between the two. And you can do things too, like place tape over it, minimize it. You know, it's all up to you.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and then because at the same time you want to think offensive, defensive. Like I want my buddies to be able to identify me, but I don't want to be going up a dark stair and then I'm like illuminating everything with like a green or a blue tint, and then providing that indicator right there. Also moving in conjunction with the helmet, I do have IR flags, you know, right there. So, you know, when the lasers are shining, somebody's hitting, it just kind of produces a little bit of a glow and marks your position a little bit better. These ones also glow in the dark. First Spear makes on their laser cut. They do a pretty good job when it comes to IR flags, and then you can just choose your option of what you want. Moving forward of the helmet.
Yeah, so let's talk about the front here. So obviously you have your clip-on eye probe, but so the mount, you know, obviously this it's a Wilcox mount, has multiple points of adjustment on here.
Right.
And so another thing too is I noticed these hooks right in the front too, and so those hooks obviously they are for clipping onto the device for you know, an extra like retention. Is that the you know, the case in case anything happens?
Yeah. So you know, guys that are doing performance things, running a lot, or flying, or sitting exterior of a vehicle. Even jumping, you know, for military type operations, does provide hooks right here. Once you mount it into the flip mount, being the dovetail of your PVS-31, you have these additional hooks that you can attach. And then the way that the monoculars or BMVGs are being made these days, they have little clips right here that, you know, hooks right in, and then it secures it right in place and stuff. So
even if their night vision doesn't have it, I'm sure there's a way they can like make some type of. You know, I'm sure you've seen clever ways. Of
I've seen guys like coil metal wire. I've seen guys do, you know, paracord, and then you know there's like and actually, in fact, like in my early days of my military career, it was standard since airborne units. You had to tie down all your sensitive items, so you learned all the knots and the tricks on how to secure your items, and then even that item run into your helmet, or if you have a clip in, then you can clip into that. So, you know, there's just a couple different ways to look at it. The way I look at it is like whatever your attachment method is it impeding or is it assisting me? You know, and if it's impeding, then I need to make an adjustment.
Maybe that's a good way to put it. See and that's mainly the stuff we're highlighting here, because like I said, when we talk about the devices, talk about what they can do, now implementing is a whole different story. You can see right now that the helmet alone is a whole thing in itself, but it's a necessity because that's what you have to mount your night vision to if you're running the laser. So all this stuff comes into play. You know, your battery pack, your ear pro that connects to it, you know, additional IR lights in your mounting system, and also retention on the night vision device in case it falls off. You don't want it to, you know, like I said, hit some vegetation or hit a branch or something and it gets knocked off, and then you're looking for it in the dark. So it's like a big consideration or this, you know, the helmet's a big consideration to look into. And like I said, choose wisely and do your research, because there's a lot of companies out there that they do make good helmets. I mean, especially he's talking about the bump helmets, things like that. I mean, majority of the stuff, like, it doesn't need to be ballistic. I mean, unless that's what you want ballistic, by all means. But there's helmets out there that'll protect your head, and also it will mount the device securely to your head.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, cool.
All right, and then some of the things here too, just want to talk about in terms of the mount. As always, like when you have your mount there, I mean, you're going to have the time to be able to take your components, figure out how far do you like it away from your face to how close, you know, what's the tilt and the angle and all that. And I know, like, once you put, you know, night vision on, it does add a little bit of weight right there. And, you know, I feel sometimes if I haven't been doing it for a while, I start getting little strains right here on the back muscles. And, you know, there's a couple things that can kind of help you out in the relief on that. If you look at the helmet, you know, what's the internal head system here on the ops core? You know, we just got the turn dials here, so it just kind of cinches this in. Gives me a lot more, I would say, points of contact around my head to secure the helmet. So once I have the added weight there, and if I'm moving dynamically, it's not shifting around and then breaking away from my direct line of sight as I would be looking through the MVGs. Some people will put like a counterbalance on the back.
Yeah, I've seen those. It's just like a Velcro pack with weights, correct?
Yeah.
And so that will kind of offset it. And obviously with Jonas having the battery pack full of batteries, that gives it a little bit of weight to kind of offset it.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
It's only like the weight of like 4 batteries and then, you know, a piece of plastic. So it doesn't really give a whole lot.
Okay.
But then, Chris is 100% right. I mean, there are people that do have attachments that are there, different brands and manufacturers. Some will have weight already in there. There is a set that I have that's, I didn't bring it, unfortunately, but very, very streamlined. It just Velcros to the helmet, doesn't create any bulk out.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it sticks right there flush with the helmet, and it's designed to kind of place it wherever the individual likes it for comfort reasons or that counterbalance right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, let's get the table cleared off, and we'll talk about Actually, we'll just mount the laser, and we'll go into some details. Obviously, now one thing I know, some lasers, they do have a visible laser in tandem with the IR laser, which helps.
Right.
And then also, we talked about this yesterday, how lasers that don't have that, there are some techniques to zero them, but also at the same time, we've seen these kits where it's a visible laser, things like that. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that here in a second.
Yeah, for sure.
But okay, well, cool. Let's clear this table off. We're going to clear it off and get the gun set up on some bags, nice and straight, and then we'll go into mounting the laser. Well, now we got a gun. So laser, right? Where to put it? What are your preferences? What do you recommend? And obviously, I've seen it multiple ways. Up front, obviously, and there's some, obviously, you explained to me there's some considerations, obviously, when you place it up front, and there's considerations if you place it to the rear and even to the side.
Yeah.
So, but we have a nice top rail here, so that's the common place most individuals put it there. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, to me, it's just the only real reasons why I've seen guys just kind of place lasers to the side, whether it's to the left or to the right, is just mainly like long gunners, and then they have additional components or optics that they have to attach on, so they kind of need the rail space.
Okay.
For me, as a individual shooter or assaulter, however you want to identify yourself, I like having the laser directly on top. I mean, the reasons why, it's just it's right there in my control of my support hand. And if I'm transitioning from right to or strong side to weak side on my carbine, I can still operate it. So I try to set the gun up where it's ambidextrous.
So what you're saying is you have the room on the top rail. You prefer to put it there because obviously left and right, ambidextrous doesn't get in the way.
And it's easier to zero and figure out your hold-offs because, I mean, you think just like how your optic is, height over bore. So, you want to be able to have that right there. If I'm placing off the sides, then I have to learn an entirely new concept of point A and point A impact. And some, it's just going to take a little bit longer. But once I got it up here, height over bore, there's some similarities to these, but there's some considerations to the fact of it's a laser, it's a straight beam working in conjunction with the round that's trajecting. Cool. But yeah, kind of going up on the mounts like you were talking about on the fronts here.
Let's move this. Maybe we should get the camera right there. There we go. A little bit better. And then, here's your laser, fresh out the package. Now, one thing too, right when before you pull your laser out, or obviously when you do pull it out to inspect it, what is the one thing, I mean, you told me this before, what is the one thing, even with optics, that you recommend?
Yeah, read your manual. Read your manual, become familiar with the equipment, not just care and maintenance, but then how to operate it. And then also understanding, when you're adjusting the reticle clicks on zeroing, at what distance am I going to have, what's the change right there on each click. So, it's just, it helps out instructors too, especially on the range. I get very aggravated sometimes with students where, whether it's law enforcement or somebody else, and they got some new equipment, and say it's an optic I'm not familiar with because they decide to go a different route and improve their own method, which is fine. But it's like, okay, what's your MOA, on each click, and then they can't tell you, so or it's like, hey, what's the MOA of your reticle dot that you're looking at? They can't tell you. So yeah, read your manuals, very important, especially on the care and maintenance piece, because these things are expensive. You break one, maybe you'll have the budget, but then even if you do have the budget, then you have to consider the time waiting to be able to receive the object. But
and even in the settings too, that's the whole thing of reading the manual. Because obviously we have it set to aiming laser right now, but that's the whole thing. You have to understand what the high power and dual power is, and a sense of where that setting is. Because some people just kind of rotate it. And I know we removed the screws to kind of show some different examples today, but some will have a safety stop like we explained in the last video.
Right, absolutely.
Right, so.
And so we'll just talk about mounting before we get into the components, of the actual laser itself, and then the different settings and what that means. But a couple different mounting options. There's some things out there, and really the way I look at it is like, what's your personal preference? What works sufficiently with you on trying to manipulate this piece of equipment in conjunction with your weapon system. So you can't have guys here. You want to make sure that number one, your front sight posts, if they're flip downs or they're fixed, they work in conjunction whatever your laser product is. So whether it's an L3 to a B. Myers product to D-ball. So you would just want to make sure that there's nothing here that's going to obstruct or impede the the IR laser or the visible laser or your floodlight itself.
Yeah.
And so
because all these different front sides of flip boats are wider, the base is wider,
right.
All these things to take into consideration with that too. And then even with, if you want to go with your irons permanently up, I know some people will fix the front up and keep it in there because they're running a low third. And then some mounts such as this with the as far as the fast mount has a cutout here to where you can have obviously your front. You're going to be you can look through here and go through to your side.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So talk about front sight post here. Typically like on my carbines, I actually have same front sight post, same model design, but I actually reverse mine around. And the reasons why is like when this is down, this is forcing me to have to put the laser back a little bit further on the rail. And I'll talk about pros and cons on going back even further than that. I like to have the front sight post flipped around. Allows me to have another additional inch or two that I can move the IR laser up to the front, and then it goes in conjunction with my forward control of my support arm and my support hand grip. But I've gotten beat up on social media from people that's like, flip that thing around, it looks stupid, whatever. You just don't understand, what I'm trying to accomplish. So there's nothing wrong with that, flipping the front sight post around, reversing it. I mean, you still have to zero it.
Right, it doesn't matter. Whether you're still looking at the same picture whether the side is turned around or not. You're still looking at the same
and another reason why I like the front sight post turn around, not just because it brings my laser up closer, towards the front of the rail, but also, too, if I had to manipulate it, I don't need to drive the gun back, flip it up, and then go back forward. I can just immediately just take my forward hand and just flip that front sight post up. So it's been effective for me, and the application of what I needed it for.
So in this particular, we can do that right now. As a matter of fact, like before we start doing later, we can remove that, flip it around, and then what's inside. Because that's the whole thing too. It's like, say you already have your gun set up like this. Now you get a laser. Well, you might have to adjust your front or your obviously your front flip up, or what do you have there? Or even if you don't have one at all, but in a sense like you might remove it. But in the sense like this is the whole part of the process. You have your laser. You're going to kind of mess around things with it, and that's something you need to do. Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's going to clear up more rail space, especially running a shorter rail, like as far as 10.5s and things like that.
You get 10.5s or even something even shorter than that.
Well, I say we do that right now.
Okay, well, let's check it out.
And there you go.
So you see how that's done. I mean, it's not rocket science right there, but kind of beforehand, the IR laser was right here. So regardless of the model, being an L3 product model, that would have had it gone back there. Now I can just kind of bring it up a little more forward. You can see that. Now, especially because we did talk about a key point here on running SBRs, so running an SBR, a short barrel, whether it's a 12.5, 10.5, 8.3, whatever. Obviously the shorter the barrel, the less real estate that I'm going to be able to have. So some guys because of that, they may have long arms or, just however they have to adjust their weapon system. For me, just the shorter the rail, the longer my buttstock's getting extended out, just because I got long arms. I need to be able to have that control of torquing and turning in on my support arm grip for the management of the gun. But, some guys do not like having lasers up here. Somehow they feel, no matter what, even reversing the front sight post around, this is impeding my grip management of my support hand grip. And so therefore, I don't like having objects that are there that may break that grip. And you'll see some guys where they'll attach either their pressure pads to tack lights or something to there, and they'll bring the laser back. I don't have any issues with that. My thing is like just bringing it back as long as it's like when you mount it and you're going through your floodlights to your lasers, as long as nothing in the rail system going forward is catching into that and impeding the clarity of your light or your floodlight right there. That's just kind of one thing that you want to account for as going back. But then also understand, too, that in some aspects that the further this is back, if I'm having to operate it by hand, I'm also retracting my support hand grip back, and it may slow down my cadence fire just because on the recoil management purposes that I'm back versus being forward.
So there's something that someone's got to train with and be aware of that.
Right, yeah.
In the sense when you implement your IR laser, you have to be more cognizant of your hand placement. And they'll probably see it. Obviously, if they're running night vision, their laser gets blocked, they're going to obviously know. Yeah.
So we'll just get this guy mounted on here. Cool. All right. So this is the NGAL model, next generation aiming laser made by L3. And this is kind of the next generation upgrade from the Appeal PEC 15, LA5, where you want to call it, depending on the power class right there. But yeah, so on the manual here, we busted it out, and honestly, over the years, I mean, I've seen guys, torque it down a little bit too tight where they've snapped this, and then now you got a little bit of a problem because then you got to come up with the replacement part, and these don't come with replacement parts. So with that, the manual, it states like, hey, hand turn it, and then at that point, then go ahead and take your screwdriver and then do a half turn altogether on the torquing. There isn't really necessarily like a poundage concept, but when I put it in here, I'm not going to keep tightening until I break the screw, but I'm going to get it on there that it doesn't wiggle, it doesn't move. And then I'll recheck it after I've fired some rounds and stuff to make sure that the recoil hasn't loosened this up whatsoever.
And that'd be something you witnessed Mark II with the pen, correct?
Right, absolutely. Yep, and exactly. And so it's just like if I need to take this off and put it to a different system or whatever the case, or just take it off for whatever reason, just make sure that you're placing it back to the same place so then you can maintain that zero.
Easy. All right, so there you go. We got this.
Here we go. We'll take the tool.
Shout out to Fix It 6 right here. Awesome kit. Does everything you need to do.
So basically, I just open this up all the way. All right, so it's loose, and then as I come up, then I'll just kind of put the laser in place, like you see.
We go through the whole Picatinny route. It's like inserting a USB drive, One way, no way, back to the other way.
Then we'll just go ahead, kind of hand tighten that down. I'll use a screwdriver.
And I know some have levers, things like that. They could just, attach on, make sure it has good tension onto it. This one has as far as just a flat screwdriver, very simple.
Yep.
All right, easy day.
Yep, and then so that's completely mounted on right there. For those of you guys that are worried about losing this object, you don't trust in terms of like the securement of it, just because again your costs, where you're paying out of pocket, especially if it's your individual cost. Once it's mounted on, you can't run like a zip tie over it to secure it in place. You can put wire around there and attach it to your rail and just twist it, as a component, as a tie down.
And I know some of them, just like the MVGs, will have this one has as far as like a loop here too, obviously addition. And some lasers that you buy will have that built into it to kind of do an extra little bit of tie down.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it's just things to consider, think contingencies, and stuff, and especially
it's expensive stuff.
Yeah,
too.
especially if you're paying out of pocket. I can't afford to lose this, and then again, but if you do lose it and you can't afford to replace it, think of the time that it takes for you to receive that product back. So, there's just a couple things to consider. But all right, so as you guys can see here, end gal is mounted up on the gun, and I like it on the positioning of where it is because it just coincides with how my support hand grip is. For me, I know that there's options like for pressure pads. I mean, it's very common, pressure pads for tack lights and such. Don't have it on this gun because it's not mine, at least not yet. But with that, like on my tack light pressure pad, I actually do mount those and then zip tie them in place on a 45 degree on the rail here. Or, so I've seen some guys that like placing it back here, but then again, just that consideration, I'm having to retract my hand back for my laser to light manipulation or light manipulation.
So even having the pressure switch on a primary here, if you go ambidextrous, you can always have the top button for secondary.
Yeah, and I don't use a pressure pad to operate any IR lasers. Just since already my support hand grips here, I just use the top button that's in place. I mean, single push, temporary on, double click push, permanent on. Just kind of similar to some of the Surefire pressure pads that you see. And then how that works, but. Cool. Yeah, so that's mounted up right there.
Go into like a couple options. I mean, as far as a couple methods to just discuss on ways to zero the laser.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna pick one and then we're gonna implement that.
Yeah. So a couple different ways to zero laser. I mean, it's all dependent on what target you're using. There's a couple different ones, and you have your standard military 300 meter, target where on a visible laser there's a point of aim and a point of impact.
Gotcha.
And then that's executed at 25 yards or 25 meters for that. And then so there's a couple different other manufacturers where, on a visible or on the visible laser aspect, where am I placing that laser at? And as I'm firing, where should the rounds be striking at? So it's two different points that you're looking at. So the laser still always goes in that point, and then you're making your adjustments. You still put the laser there for your rounds to strike at the offset, mechanical offset that's implemented on the target for point of aim, point of impact. And then, you just got to see, like, what's that coincide and represent?
Gotcha.
Is it 100 yards? Is it 200? Is it 300? So what that's going to have a little bit of a variable distance on that, because what it's doing is kind of zeroing it as either like a parallel, depending on the target, or converging where my round and my laser on the point of impact are meeting together,
So
right
essentially,
there.
it's like a second set of holds. You got to know your holds for your red dot,
Right.
But now you added a laser, which is another entity, and it's going to be at a different angle. So now you got to figure out your holds for that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not like rocket science. It's just getting familiar with it. I think it's just
Training.
Training for me. I like to know where my round is going.
Yeah.
And so I have to think in conjunction, not just distance, but then size of target or size of the threat that I'm engaging at. Low percentage, high percentage. Is there a mechanical offset that is required or not? And so these are things that I have to become familiar with right there.
And so I know some lasers, especially like military lasers in the past, they'll come with a cheat sheet. You do it for like 10, 15 meters, put this dot here, make your dot here as far as like a bore sight, and it'll basically say, okay, you're good to go. But that's one thing I've seen people, they'll go out to the range, they'll train, they'll put a laser on a steel target, shoot it, and they'll get positive feedback. But one thing we're doing today is with paper, and it says, because that's where you're really going to know, because you might hit that steel, but remember that target is wide. So you want to know as far as like where you're putting that laser, you have to know exactly, because you discussed previously about high percentage and low percentage shots. So if you want to make sure that you're as accurate as you can, because if you got to aim at a small target and the distance gets further, you want to be able to know that you're going to hit the target.
Absolutely. And I'll talk about a couple of different methods. I mean, a lot of it too, with guys that if you have the time to sit down and then accurately group, accurately dial things in, then get the right targets and then be able to do that. But even something like a quick field zero. So for example, in my earlier days, like being in military service, there just wasn't a lot of time to really kind of check zeros and stuff. And so we just do a quick field zero. So it's like, okay, my optic is zeroed, point aim, point of impact, 50 to 200. All right. So within that, at 200, like we used to just go out there either at a building facade face or go out in open space and just drop a chem light. And, it's a converging zero as a field zero, but then I would just get behind my optic with my night vision device, turn it down a real low setting. And then I would just dial that laser to where, when I hit the button on the laser, it was going directly over that reticle glow dot that I'm picking up. And then I wouldn't see like a shift. So there wasn't like dot and then laser. It was just like, okay, I'm pushing the button, but then it's over top itself. So that worked very well. Just again, like when I did that, I still had to train at different known distances to know what my hold offs were, point of aim, point of impact. And then so on here coming up, the target that we're going to be utilizing is a parallel zero. And what that does and what that means is that I'm not dialing the laser in for point of aim, point of impact. What I'm doing is I'm dialing the laser where there's just a little bit of an offset, but it goes center line with the bore axis, in conjunction with your direct line of sight. Well, not direct line of sight, but your bore axis. So that right there, you just kind of have, the barrel going this way as the hole. I mean, granted, the round's going to traject, and I still have to account for hold-offs, but then my laser just kind of paralleling that right there. So then, that's one method, and then the converging aspect is point of aim, point of impact.
Gotcha.
Right, and there's targets there that can help you out. They, smarter people than us figured this out, where, there's a mechanical offset, but then where it's converging to at that known distance, it is going to hit point of aim, point of impact right there. And, the thing is about converging lasers, it's great. I don't like converging, doing a converging laser at a short distance. I've met people that have done it literally, I'm not kidding, like 15 yards or 20 yards.
Because then by the time the laser's just crossing, the dots here and the laser's crossing over there.
Exactly. And so, if you there are a lot of people have some really good data graphs that kind of shows that crossover right there.
And there's a lot of good targets out there that have a good placement that we're using today.
Right.
But
and then the individuals, they were, tactical operating teams, and I'd be like, hey, why did you guys do a converging zero at like 10 yards or 15 yards? And it's like, well, because of CQB. And it's like, okay, well, now get out close quarters. What if you're in extended range? How's that crossing and meeting?
So
and
50 meters that's extended really quick.
So doing those short distance ones like that, I mean, you can now at like 200 have a 9-inch difference point of aim, point of impact, or even worse, 12 inches. And so that's putting you in the grounds of a flyer. And then, as we know, in today's world, on accountability aspects, that can maybe not work out very well for you.
So especially we call, no buens.
Exactly. So it's just being accountable. So you have to think, I think, in some aspects, like where's the range I'm trying to get at that I can be accurate with my shooting capability and visibly see things clearly with night vision. So that makes sense. I'm going to zero that in, point of aim, point of impact. and then everything coming in as it's kind of separating away and a little bit offsets, then I just have to train and figure out where my mechanical offsets are. And you know, and there's some, I mean, honestly, like circle targets or B8 dots, you know, they're not the most sexiest target, but you know, the thing I love about it is it keeps you true and honest, and it's very good on a circle to figure out where do I need to place that laser for center point in, you know, point A and point of impact. Is it 2 o'clock? Is it 1 o'clock? You know, so on.
Yeah, and that's a good example today as far as just using a basic target to get your laser zeroed in, and then also too, we'll show some, you know, as far as some of those targets, targets have graphs that are, you know, especially meant for that purpose. Obviously, it's gonna be a lot easier, but what he says, sometimes you might not have that available, and so there's ways to, you know, get this thing set up so in a you know, very accurate way with less, and then get ready to start training.
Yeah, and in today's zero target that we're going to utilize, it's a daytime IR laser zero target. So we'll be using the visible red laser on the NGAL, so that coincides with your IR laser. So every adjustment that you're making, they're going and working off the same. The downfall to it is that because you're trying to place a red laser on a little square at 25, it's very easy to move and shift that, and so you may have kind of a little bit more of a shot spread. Some of these other targets, was going to try to get them in here. They just, in terms of placing the order and then coming here in time, just wasn't going to happen. But you know, at nighttime, they put like a little piece of glint tape, or you can put your own piece of glint tape.
Yeah, true.
There. Yeah. So you don't have to buy a target; you can do it yourself. But then by holding the laser there, you're going to see that really big shine happen. That you know that laser's right where the target is telling you to put at. So then you can dial your rounds through the mechanical offset on the target. But then you can hold that right there, see that big glow, and then fire those rounds. So again, there's pros and cons to both. But you know, one of the things is that you have to accept, you know, just like utilizing an optic to utilizing a laser for your zero, you know, be disciplined on getting it to where you know, it's not like, hey, you know, a couple are in and a couple are out, I'll accept that. No, I'm going to make it super tight because it's your zero that you're having to find for yourself, you know. And so my zero may be just a little bit different from yours on what you're accepting. But then once we've gotten that zero down, then I have to go through the practical exercises on figuring out my mechanical offsets on different distances. And
then one thing, the last thing, obviously, we want to touch upon, and this is also we're going to demonstrate too. So you have your laser zeroed, everything else like that. Now, one of the things that people have to take in mind is that now you have equipment, you have a helmet on, you have goggles, and you're not going to get a normal cheek weld. So what you have to get out of that, what you have to do is get out of that mindset of traditionally holding a rifle, because there's multiple techniques, because now you're aiming off a laser, you're not looking down sight. So you have a little bit more freedom, obviously, to maneuver the rifle around your body and work on some alternate
absolutely. So, I mean, there's, and we'll talk about more of that here in a little bit, but Chris is 100% right. I mean, you don't necessarily have to come up and present the gun up high, and then you're trying to, like you would for your optic, to get that, you know, direct eye relief there, or present that optic to your eye to meet your direct line of sight to your focal point on target. Here, you can just present it up, and then after that, it's still fundamental applications on stabilization, recoil management, and such. And so, I've seen some guys, I mean, keep it here just because that's where it naturally is, and they'll present it, but then they're not trying to come up and then bring it up eye level. It's just coming up, and then I've seen some guys, depending on certain situations, they kind of bring the buttstock in a little bit more, centered to the chest, not fully centered, but just a little bit more, and then allows them to have more of a back pull winch on there to stabilize that, because it's just your field of view and perception of, like, when you're seeing your optic on your sight is a little bit different at nighttime when you're seeing your laser, just because you see this long beam and it's so easy to move and see that deviation right there. So we want to be able, especially on distance shots, so you want to be able to stabilize that as best as possible, and then learn those techniques.
And it's good you brought up fundamentals, because that's going to come into play, because you don't have a solid cheek weld now. So the trigger squeeze and keeping the gun stable, locked in, that's all going to be a little bit more, you know, you kind of got to narrow that stuff down, because now you're watching a laser move. And you'll see under night vision, when you fire, that laser's, it's going to shift. And so it's just one of the things to take account of when you start training with the stuff. Is just fundamentals. It's all going to come into play. So.
Right. Yeah. And then again, it's just, you know, like you said, the recoil there, the shift. It's a little more dramatic looking with the laser than it is, like, you know, having your single plane of view going through your optic and then looking at target. I mean, one, you just become a little bit more accustomed to this versus this and stuff. And so,
Well, cool. Well, let's get it zeroed, and we'll get some rounds down to confirm everything.
Roger that.
All right, cool.
What we're going to do here is we're going to execute a zero with our NGAL. while in a lighted environment. So we're going to utilize the visible laser right there. Went online just because I said like the targets that I was looking for where we could do this under MVG specifically, they just weren't going to arrive in time on a delivery. So went online, open source, found a good downloadable target, Spot Bear Solutions, appreciate it. Had it printed out and then double check the measurements by a ruler just to make sure that the settings on the printer or the screen or on the computer when it's printing out, it coincides with what they're saying right there. So yeah, how's this target's going to work? You guys can see here, don't worry about these parts. This is just for zeroing your actual original optic on your gun, whether it's a aim point, EOTech, or whatever. And with that, you're just kind of using that square in conjunction with here, and then a confirmation at 50. So what we're doing here, guys, is we're going to be utilizing our visible IR, or our visible red laser on the NGAL. And basically, I'm going to be placing the laser directly on this little square. So even at 25 yards, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see. I've already done the adjustment setting on my dial here and bring it to a low, a visible low, so not the highs where it's a brighter beam. And that way I can just be a little more precise on putting it there on this box. So what I'm looking for in conjunction with this target is IR lasers, the visible lasers here, and then my rounds are hitting here. So after every single little group, I do a grouping of 5, and then what I'm looking for out of the 5 rounds is 3 the most consistent that are tightest, and then just because it could be a fundamental flaw with the other 2. And after each 5, I'll annotate, come back, do some adjustments on the windage and elevation here of the visible laser, which is also automatically adjusting your IR laser beam or infrared beam. And then we are going to get the rounds here in this little circle. And then once that's there and it looks pretty tight, then I know I've got a 0, and then we're going to go into mechanical offsets and then tracking that for different distances and such. Okay, so before I even began, I went ahead and took the covers off of the NGAL, made sure that the screens right here that you see, or the lenses in front of the IR visible laser side to the floodlight side was clean. There was no debris or fingerprints. Sometimes like just placing a fingerprint right there can cause distortion with your laser. So, you know, if I come out and I clean it, basically I'm using either Q-tips or some kind of soft type, almost like a lens wipe for your sunglasses that you have, and clean it out that way. Did an inspection with the visible laser to ensure that it works. It works. The indicator lights on the back was showing that it was activating, and you know, also checked the inside of the NGAL, the battery housing component there, that there was no debris or corrosion or moisture or anything like that. So yeah, got a target set up down here at 25 yards, and then I'm going to go basically just get load and make ready, execute 5 well aim place shots, go down, we'll check target, come back, make any adjustments. Also too, just know, you need to know on your windage and elevation adjustments what click corresponds with how much distance. And so if you pull out the manual, it says it's 1 centimeter. Okay, what does that equate to the non-metric system? 3/8 of an inch and stuff per click at 25 yards. Okay, and then that's obviously going to be different at a 50 and at 100. As you guys can see here, this is where I'm placing my visible laser, is on that box the entire time. This is my first string, 5 rounds, and then going here to the second string, and then finalizing out my third string right there in the circle. As you guys can see, you'd be like, hey, why does your shot spread suck so much? Well, I mean, for one, it's a little bit hard to kind of see in here in an indoor shooting range. You got light coming back on you. And also, too, just having this little tiny square at that distance, probably if I had like a little bit of a 3-power flip mount, that might have helped me out a little bit better. But in terms of placing the laser, if you guys notice, I did not go directly up center. Therefore, I'm not going to be able to see where the center line is coming up. It's just a little bit too busy where I can get lost in that. So what I was doing is I knew where the box was, and I was coming up over the side and then driving the laser center into here and then trying to maintain that hold for my point of aim, for my point of impact right there. So just one of the things that kind of helped me kind of dial this in right away was I actually did take my visible laser on the gun, and then I did zero it to where it coincided with my reticle dot. So therefore, not knowing how bad off the laser may have been and working at 25, I wasn't shooting and then missing cardboard completely, and then having to go up and then 10 yards, dial it in, and come on back. Kind of just sort of automatically got me in that playing field where now it's just a little fine tuning at that point, just based off of dialing in the visible laser to the reticle dot of my optic before I began the actual zero. All right, even when operating various different types of infrared laser systems, regardless of the manufacturer, the shooting fundamentals still stay the same. So you still have a stance, you still have the ability that you need to pocket your buttstock properly and have positive contact, utilize your support arm properly for control measures and ability to drive the gun where you need to. And so none of that changes. I would say that the only difference on some of this is the factor that I don't necessarily have to present my carbine up where I'm trying to almost acquire my sights. Now, I would in the sense if my laser failed and I had to utilize my optic as a secondary means in order to accurately place shots. And there could be a variety of reasons why that happened. It got broken, battery went out, I have no spares, I lacked doing pre-combat inspections before I rolled out, so then therefore I failed myself, or something got damaged, it's just not working. So with that being stated, as I come up and I still have my placement, it's right here in the shoulder portion of my buttstock, or the bottom portion of the buttstock is completely secured into my firing shoulder. So as I come up and present the weapon system and I'm manipulating the safety going from safe to fire, or I may not have the intention of engaging at the moment, so therefore I'm just turning my laser on to either have a point of aim onto my suspect, my threat, or potential threat, or I just have the floodlight on, so I'm bringing it up and I'm scanning all around. So as I'm scanning all around, I mean, it's still relaxed and loose right here. I'm very comfortable, but then if I have to take a shot, automatically, as I'm coming in and presenting that weapon system up, and then turning that laser on in conjunction with the manipulation of my weapon going from safe to fire, as I'm coming up and pocketing my buttstock to my firing shoulder, I'm actually overdriving my firing shoulder. So I'm just bringing it up, wrapping it just a little bit over the buttstock to create a good solid pocket. So in the event if I did blade off somehow, the gun isn't gonna slip off. As I'm doing that, my support arm control. Like I stated earlier, I don't like pressure pads on IR lasers. They can fail, they can break, or whatnot. I just generally keep my thumb directly on the pressure pad built into the system itself. And so when I come up and I'm manipulating that and then just getting the laser to go, I'm still, as I'm overdriving my firing shoulder, my support arm doing kind of a quarter turn in and then retracting back on my shoulder. And that retraction coming back, I'm not retracting off to the side because that's going to deviate my rounds off, or it's going to pull me off where my focal point is, where I'm trying to concentrate rounds in place on my target, whether to the left or to the right, depending on how my pull is. So when I come back, it's just a compression. So I'm able to vice the gun, and during my sustainment of my engagement, whether it's 1 round, 2 rounds, 20,000 rounds, I mean, obviously I got to do some reloads in that, but what I'm doing is I'm managing that recoil by vicing the gun, okay, and compressing. And I'm still going almost at a single plane of view, forward focus of my target. I still identify, or I still accomplish a direct line of sight to my focal point, where I want those rounds to place at. And then as I've done that, I'm presenting the weapon system. That's when I manipulate that laser, and then I just drive that laser with my support arm to that focal point and maintain that control and hold there while I take my shots. And after I execute my shots, I still do my follow through. Reassessment, scanning, thinking about what I'm gonna do at that time, and then also checking the condition of my weapon system, especially at nighttime. Some manipulations that need to be considered and then obviously practiced quite a few times is your reloads in conjunction with all the other manipulation methods in developing confidence in the weapon system. You're limited on view or your field of view. Okay, I'm only operating like through, I think it's like 15 degrees. All right, so I'm basically looking at everything through a toilet paper roll, even though it's a BMVG. All right, so I don't have peripheral vision. I'm not able to break eyes away and then look down and near, on objects of my weapon system and such. So I have to practice these placements and then be consistent with it. So therefore, Murphy's Law, or I have a bad mechanical maneuver or I misalign my motor skills, could cause a problem. That could be on my hand placement to include the reloads. So on the reloads, with that consideration in place, the only thing I do different on it is because of not being able to visually break eyes from target and look at my magazine well as the magazine is going in, all I basically do is still keep focus on target, but then I transfer the gun more directly underneath my arm so I can lock it in place to minimize movement. Then that's going to coincide with my economy of motion as I come up with my reload to be able to drive that in. And that's one thing I'm pretty consistent with, especially when operating under MVGs.